This podcast is proudly brought to you by the SiteShed's Business Accelerator program. Now, let me ask you a question. Are you fed up and sick and tired of having to depend on other people or other contractors to generate your own work for you? Do you ever just get completely confused with the whole lead generation scenario for your business? Or what about instances where people do come to your door, but they're not your ideal customer? How would you like to be able to generate qualified leads for your customers on demand? If you head across to the siteshed.com/explode, you'll be able to get access to the free training that we've put together, which takes you through the step-by-step process in which we've been able to help clients generate some crazy results in their business. I'm talking results like 179 highly qualified leads within the space of up to 30 days. All this is very available to you and the training is free. So head across to the siteshed.com/explode and you can check it out for yourself.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello and welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the SiteShed. My name is Matt Jones and you are joining us today for the very first episode of the Grow Your Perfect Business podcast series, which is a brainchild that I've put together as a result of what we've learned throughout the year so far in developing our Business Accelerator program. You know, we've just come such a long way with this amazing product. And I've just along the way, I've been taking notes and validating different potential topics for the podcast. So I apologize for not having recorded one in a while. I know many of you have been beating down the door, emailing, asking when the next one is. So my apologies for that. However, rest assured, we have not been slacking off or sitting on a beach in the Bahamas. We have actually been very proactive in developing this program. And as a result, we can now bring to you this amazing series. Now, it's a little bit different, this series, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is actually going to have a visual element to it. So I'm actually recording this podcast at the moment, and we are going to be hosting that on the SiteShed. You'll be able to see the link to it. So if there's anything that you want in the sense of, you want to see the way that we've mapped these things out or some of the programs or tools or et cetera that we talk about within this series, you will be able to do that. Just head across to the siteshed.com/podcasts and you will be able to find links to these episodes as they come out. They will be tagged as perfect. So if all you need to do is when you're in the search bar, just type in perfect and it should show up. Okey-doke. So I just want to talk through, I suppose, the mindset of the reason why we've created this. Now, the new Business Accelerator program is basically designed to take you from A to B and throughout that journey of how to get there. So, where you currently are, where you currently need to be, and then the process of how to get there. And throughout that, I've actually realized, there's a lot of things here that we can talk about on the podcast, which can add a lot of value to you guys. So I warn you in advance, this framework, this structure that I'm sharing with you right now is very likely to change somewhat. I'm treating it more as a bit of a work in progress scenario here. So if you see, by the time if you listen to this, you jump into this link and you can see that it's changed a little bit. That is because we've been developing it and optimizing it. However, I've broken it down into certain series of, I suppose, what I would consider important business areas. So the one we're going to talk about today is planning, idea, development, and validation. And I've sort of done it in a specific order here because I think, basically, if you're going to start up a business or if you're going to develop a concept, then you need to sort of be operating within a certain order in order to get the right result. For example, there's not much point in talking about, marketing your product if you haven't validated your idea. So, marketing is going to come a little bit later. And I'll also say as well, some of these topics are quite in-depth. I will be bringing a lot of experts in on this project, and some of these topics alone may have, 2 or 3 different tiers to them. So, maybe a couple of different recordings, or it may have a couple of different collaborators, or, it's really some of them are quite in-depth. So, at the time of recording this, we've got planning, idea development, validation. We've got defining your audience and profiling. We've got defining your offer. We've got finding the right help. We've got defining job roles, building a strong team, designing your systems, marketing, sales and service, financial management, and then innovation. So that will change, as I said. However, that's where we're standing at the moment. So I think what we'll probably do is jump straight into the first episode, which is planning, idea development, and validation. So the reason I've obviously started with this is because I want you guys to make sure that, whatever you're applying yourself to, there's a market for it. So I've actually broken it down into 4 separate areas here. The first one is planning and framing. The second one is product or service. And then we have you, and then we speak about capital. So I'm just going to jump into planning and framing here. Again, if you head across to, as I said, I'm recording this actually as a screen share as well. So for those of you that actually want to see it mapped out, then you're more than welcome. All the links will be within the show notes anyway, so fear not. So it's important we understand our reason why, when we're in that planning and we're in that framing stage. And this is not necessarily just relevant to starting up a business either. I mean, I would encourage you to take a similar approach when maybe you're running a new promotion, or maybe you're wanting to add a service to your business, or, to be honest, it could be anything. It might be bringing a partner on board. It might be hiring staff. It could be anything. However, you really got to figure out what your why is. So, it's really about brainstorming, and it's the good thing about brainstorming is, it enables you to set aside time where you can allocate a specific, that specific slot to that one problem, and the idea is to get it out of your head. So when we talk about planning and framing things, it's really about, we all have these ideas running around in our head all the time. It's really about taking it out of your head and putting it into a visual platform. So you'll find that when you start visualizing things and you start drawing things out in the planning process, it enables you to really start making connections to other areas. So I'm using a program here called MindMeister, and I'm basically presenting this podcast and this recording off that program. And you can see that the way that that's structured enables me to really grow and develop ideas further. So, I've got my different categories that I want to speak about, and then I've got categories off that, then I've got subcategories off them, and it just can keep going and going. And then when I open it all up, it's all standing there in front of me, and it just makes it really visual and really, I suppose, enables you to really get involved in that creative process and really, get those creative juices flowing. The good thing about it too is if you're using a collaborative program, and we're not going to get into programs in a little bit, but it's not really the point of this episode. We're not necessarily talking about programs, but it's more about, that mindset, and it's that paradigm as opposed to what you may currently be doing. But, we can develop them a lot further. So, if as I said before, this series that I've created here and I've mapped out, over time, it's going to change, and it will change when, as I start developing and as I start executing these programs and recording certain things and speaking to different people, I'm going to come across different ideas which I can add to this series, which will inevitably change what it was originally. Okay. So how do we go about it? Now, it really doesn't matter how you go about it. And I've read heaps of different books on, project management and planning and structuring and all this kind of stuff. For the better part, most of the feedback that you'll see in relation to that is it doesn't really matter what you use as long as you use something. However, what I have found is very common across the board is you need to get it out of your head. So, it's the same thing with some of the, in previous episodes where we're talking about processes and systems and things like that. The idea there is really to take it out of your head and document it in some way. And what you're effectively doing is you're taking intellectual knowledge and you're turning it into intellectual property. So I'm sitting here now with, this whole map and this structure on this podcast series, which is now really something of value because it's, I know for sure that this is going to be an extremely successful podcast series based off the planning and the development that I've been able to apply to it. So if you want to use apps, if you're digitally inclined, I'd suggest there's a heap of tools out there for mind mapping. And mind mapping, basically, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's basically taking an idea and then branching ideas off that idea that all sort of relate to it. So you can kind of grow and develop your idea visually right in front of you, and you can alter it and steer it in whatever direction you want based off, I suppose, how creative your thinking is. So this program that I'm using right now is called MindMeister. I'm loving this program at the moment. We're using it a lot, and it's actually tying into some of our project management tools, which I'll get to when we talk about project management. However, there's another program called Lucidchart, which is also quite good. And then if you're a Google Apps user, which I'm hoping you are, or Google Suite as it's now called, G Suite, there's a free one called draw.io, and you can get that as part of you can get that through the Chrome store. Anyway, look, they all effectively do a relatively similar thing. Some of them are structured a little bit differently and have different advantages. But again, I wouldn't let that, it's not so much about the product, it's about getting that result, right? Alternatively, you can go to the non-digital side of things, which some of you may be a whiteboard, some of you may be a sheet of paper, some of you it might be the back of a beer coaster in the pub, I don't know. But I actually personally love, and I start all of my ideas with my whiteboard. And there'll be a photo in the show notes here of where I actually drew out this process on my whiteboard, and then I transferred it across to my mind mapping program so I could develop it further. But it all started with the whiteboard. And for me, as a visual person, I love getting there. I'm amazed at what I can create in such a short period of time, just with a blank whiteboard and maybe a glass of red wine. But I really do find it helps me when I want to visually create something. And it just, as opposed to if I sit there and think about it, sure, I can think about things, okay, but it's not the same as for me getting it out there in front of me and getting it visually right in front of my eyes. I have used paper in the past. I just find paper is, I don't know if you're anything like me, I tend to misplace it and it does get lost in the ether. So personally, my process, I like whiteboarding things and then I like developing them further with a mind mapping tool. And I know for certain Nils from Innovation Blueprint, who you would have heard on the podcast previously, he creates all of his business systems and processes with mind maps. So it is a very, very powerful tool. And don't for a second think that it's a substitute, for some of these in-depth system creation programs. It's not at all. Like mind mapping is very much so an enterprise solution process that, corporate organizations use right across the world, right through to small scale businesses. And I encourage you guys to really jump in there and give it a go, because I'm convinced that it will certainly make a difference to you. So when we talk about what we're going to plan, as we said before, there's nothing really specific. There's nothing overly specific that should be planned in black or white. To be honest, pretty much most things should be planned. I've got here business ideas. We've got marketing campaigns, launch funnels, absolutely. Product releases, systems and processes, marketing, HR, hiring processes, even your cash flow, things like that, accounting. So, if you're going to create a successful marketing funnel, then you absolutely need to understand how the flow of that program, of that workflow is going to work. And a lot of these programs out there that we do use for things like email automation, they rely heavily on a very similar mind mapping sort of flow chart. So, when you're actually creating these campaigns and you're creating these automations, they have a very, very active mind mapping process that makes it very visual and very easy for you to understand. And that's kind of a pretty good testament to, I suppose, this entire episode, because if these, multi-million dollar programs that corporations right around the world are using, as well as small business, then that's kind of proof in the pudding. Okay, so let's jump into product or service. So when we're developing, an idea or, trying to get some validation on it, it's important that we consider things and we draw out, I suppose, what's relevant to that product or to that service. What's unique about it? Why is it different from what's out there in the competition? What is the competition doing anyway? And don't look at competition necessarily as a bad thing. Like a lot of people I speak to, especially, they want to start up and develop a niche within their industry because there's no competition in there. But you've got to be careful, because sometimes the competition actually validates your idea. Like, we know for certain that you're never going to run out of plumbers because everybody needs plumbing, but if you niche yourself in something super, 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 super small, not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying make sure that you validate there's a market for it. How can you do a better job of what your competition is doing? When we're talking about, analyzing and planning it, what can you do better? What can you make unique about your business or your approach to a certain service or a product or whatever it is? How can you put your specific spin on it? Have you thought about who would buy it? Have you been through a customer profiling exercise where you sit down and you figure out location, gender, family status, marital status, age, all these kind of things, social circles, hobbies and likes, all this kind of stuff that, you would help you really develop, I suppose, a product that's customized towards your client. Can you service it? So, that may sound obvious, but, are you actually in a position to service what you're offering? And by that I mean, we get a lot of people obviously that come to us, and when we're running marketing campaigns and things for organizations, a lot of people have, are very, ambitious, I suppose. And, they kind of come in with a mentality, well, I want to be the biggest whatever company it is in Sydney, and I want to dominate that market. However, realistically, if overnight we could somehow get them the same amount of leads that some of these massive companies are getting, the reality is they're probably never going to be able to service it in the same way, and they'll probably go out of business pretty quickly. So, you've got to be realistic on what you can deliver. And that's not to say you shouldn't have big goals and big ambitions. Absolutely you should. However, you need to plan and work out how to get from A to B and work out the process from getting there. Do you require staff? So this is something that also needs to be planned. Obviously, as you get bigger, you're going to need to develop a team that can help you get there. So is that something that you want to commit to? And if so, at what stage do you want to commit to it? So there's no point in, first of all, saying, okay, let's hire somebody for this job because in the hope that one day we get to, or when we get to here, there'll be work for them. Doesn't really work like that. You should really go the other way. And if you listen to one of the previous podcasts, we had one of our listeners call in with a question, and it was basically around that. When is the right time to scale my business? Is it when the work is there, or is it before, like in the planning stage? And I got Al Levy and Ellen Raw on the show to discuss this awesome question. And basically the feedback was, well, you should always, the number one priority should always be to get the work. And once you've got the work, then you can think about putting people in the right place to facilitate that area of the work. However, it is something that you should plan. So you should know, okay, well, when the work gets to this stage, so when it finally gets there, at that point, I'm going to put someone on and train them how to do that task. Okay? So how do you plan on marketing it? So, that's another thing. How are you going to get this product or service or whatever it is in front of the audience that you want, that, your ideal customer, your customer avatar? How are you going to get it in front of them? Where are they going to be? So you need to think creatively in that space as well. It may be very different to what you're currently doing. So again, draw it out. What are your options? Big companies, they don't go and do this kind of stuff ad hoc. They really map it out. They map everything out from digital marketing right through to print marketing, through to, even some of them, the size of the logo that you have on your shirt, like all this kind of stuff. It's all relevant. So develop a plan and really put that plan on paper or on an app or something where you can see how it's going to grow and how it's going to progress and what you need to do in certain areas of your marketing budget, what you need to spend, how often you're going to run campaigns, at what time of year you're going to run certain campaigns, all this kind of stuff. Like map it out, draw it out. Okay, so then jumping into the next section, which is you. Now, it's really important when we're talking about planning and idea development and validation, what's motivating you to do this, and you've got to be considerate of things that at the end of the day, if this is going to be an extension of yourself, is it going to give you the representation that you want? Is it going to be professionally represented? What's your experience? Are you trying to bolt something onto your business that you have absolutely no idea how to run? If you're a plumber and you want to put an electrical business into your bolt-on electrical area to your business, do you know anything about electrical installations? Or are you just wanting to do it because you think it might be able to turn over more money? You need to weigh up the pros and cons. Like, do you need to retrain? Are you going to have to go back to TAFE or university or college or whatever it is? Are you going to have to employ more people? Are you going to have to acquire a company? What you need to map all this kind of stuff out, right? So what's your motivation? Are you doing this to run away from something? And a lot of people do that. I mean, a lot of people think I'm just going to start this up because I want to get away from what I'm currently doing. And it's typically a dangerous approach to setting up a venture or a business, because it's very often not validated. If you're just setting something up to get away from something else, your motives are kind of in the wrong place. And it probably says that you haven't really done your product research and your market research as to whether or not, there is actually like a market for what you're being able to offer. And then, of course, that also goes back to, if you're trying to run away from something, are you experienced in what you're going to set up, or how are you going to service that niche or, that business model? Maybe though, on the flip side, you're looking to do this to carve a new future. Maybe you want to change and you're not running away from something, but you just want to steer into a different direction. And that's awesome as well. I think every business should really be sitting down regularly, if not annually, at least twice a year, and saying to themselves, okay, how can we steer this business into a better suited direction? What can we target it towards? Where's the best money we've made? Where's the best feedback we're getting? All that kind of stuff. Are you doing this to get revenge? Like, that's another motivation for people. Maybe they had the shits with somebody and they thought, bugger it, I'm just going to set up my own company and do it better than them. Like, is that actually the right reason to do that? Probably not. You're doing it because you're bored. Is it you just need something to kill the time? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you want to make more money, and there's nothing wrong with making more money. Absolutely. But I'd be very careful if you're trying to set a business up purely based off the fact that you want to make more money, because although that might look bright and shiny, there's a lot of things that go along with that. And, with that comes staffing problems, training, overheads, like all this other stuff, right? So don't get too caught up in the whole making money side of things until you have a firm plan in place as to, what it's going to actually be costing you. There's very few businesses out there that, that make money initially. It's not until they get a few systems and processes in place that things start working out financially. Maybe you're doing this because you've got an amazing opportunity and you can add value. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword because, again, that sounds very bright and shiny, and in many cases it may well be, and you'd be silly to let some opportunities go. However, if you do dive into something like that, is it going to take away from what you're currently doing? And is it going to take away, negatively? Are you going to have to stop servicing a certain area of your existing business in order to develop this other one? If so, is that going to have a negative impact on you? So what do you want to get out of it? Is this, a retirement plan for you? Or is this you want an accreditation, you want an extra ticket? Are you doing it to gain respect from your peers or from your family or from, your friends, children, whatever it is? Or is it just a money-making exercise? What is your ideal outcome? Everybody says you should always start with the end in mind. And I agree to a degree. That's certainly true. What is it? What is a win for you? How do you know if you've made it? You know what I mean? If you've reached the destination. And don't get me wrong, business is certainly a journey, not so much a destination, but it is important to understand the reasons why, you want to get it started. Do you have the time it will require? And this is a big thing, man. It's like we were saying before, right? If you've got a great opportunity, sure, that opportunity could be an excellent avenue to take. However, if it's going to come at the expense of something that you're already doing, which is already has a good name and is already generating good work and things like that, then maybe it's not a good idea. And don't get yourself, fooled by thinking that, it's not going to take a lot of time. It will take a lot of time, either your time or staff's time. And then that, of course, is money. So yes, things can be automated, and yes, things should be automated. However, it still takes time. So don't be fooled. as we've said before here, will a new venture upset your other ventures? We've already spoken about that. And will this project affect your family and your relationships? If you're spending a lot of time in that business, getting it set up, what's the butterfly effect? What's going to be happening, on the other side? Will it affect your home life? And will it affect your home life negatively? Maybe not. But again, plan it out, because if you plan it out and you say, okay, I'm going to allocate this much time every week and I'm going to slot it in here and that's the way it's going to be, at least then, you can get people to buy into it with you, or you can just stick to your plan knowing that that's what's going to happen and that is exactly how it's meant to play out. And look, obviously things will change. Yes, of course. But the reality is if you don't have anything planned out, then everything's pretty much done ad hoc. And ad hoc is dangerous because when we're doing things ad hoc, it's very reactive. So by reactive, I mean, take emails, for example, or text messages, they're often quite reactive. Somebody sends you a text, you pick up your phone, you drop what you're doing, you answer the text, you put the phone back in your pocket, and then you carry on doing what you're doing. Now, that's a reaction. So, you're better off planning things out so that it's more responsive. So, you're not actually dropping everything to do something. If something pops up, if you're responding to something, that's fine, because responding to something typically means you're taking it and you're putting it into, it might be a task or it might be an email or something like that. You're not neglecting it. However, you're putting it in a specific order. So the other thing is money. Let's talk about money. Now, does your new venture require capital investment? Often it does. And look, as we said before, time is money. So if something's going to take you a lot of time, then you need to apply some sort of dollar figure towards that time. Does it actually involve a capital investment? Do you need to go and seek funding? Do you need investors? Do you need to borrow? Can you borrow? Can you raise capital? Do you have the right connections? Have you got the right processes in place? Have you spoken to a lawyer? Have you got all your agreements in place? Have you got business partners? You really need to map all this stuff out, because if you do need to start a business and you need capital to hit the ground running, if you haven't got that, then that might be a problem for you. Now, I 100% believe in bootstrapping. So, do it lean. Whatever you're doing, do it lean. However, there are some businesses that will need capital investment. Some might need equipment. Some might need, like a lead, to employ people in the right places and things like that. So you really need to draw it out, map it out, plan it out. Also, while we're talking about capital, not necessarily specifically to money, but, let's talk about our investment from a time point of view or an energy point of view, or, what's the likelihood of affecting our health in one way or another. So these are all things that we need to consider, and we can map these stuff out as we go. So anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today in this episode. As I said, this has been recorded. You can head across to the show notes where you can see this recording physically. So if you want to sit down and watch it, you can, and you can see how we've drawn out this specific map for this episode. I plan on doing that a lot for the podcasts in this series, because a lot of the stuff is visual, and I want to show you guys how that develops. However, regardless, the bottom line is get out there and start planning. However you want to do it, it's up to you, but just make sure it gets done. That's the important thing. So that's all from me today. Hope you got a lot out of that. And if you did, please do us a favor. Go and share it with someone, because I'm sure there's other people out there that equally enjoy or would equally benefit from, having information like that handy to them. And stay tuned for the following episode. That's all from me. Bye-bye now. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.